Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the SPCSA Assessment and Accountability TA call. We welcome your participation. A little bit of the introductions. The SPCSA Accountability Assessment Team provides high quality customer service to ensure that the schools meet federal and state assessment and accountability deadlines, and schools submit accurate data. We always aim to be proactive, communicative, honest, friendly, and respectful. To introduce our staff, Selchuk Ozdemir, he is our Education Programs Supervisor. Brandon Gaitan, who's in the call here as a presenter as well, is the Education Programs Professional. And myself, I support the administrative duties of the team. The agenda for today is ongoing and upcoming assessment and accountability tasks. For the assessment side of it, we'll be talking about WIDA and WIDA Screener, assessment participation, Smarter Science, NA, specifically data cleanup. The window is May 19th to the 26th, ACT, other assessments, and the NSPF special requests. On the accountability part of the agenda, we'll be talking about Nevada report card data submissions, ADAM data collections for NSPF, CTE work-based learning and industry recognized credentials, and what we know about the 21-22 school year NSPF. For WIDA, the final 2021 WIDA and WIDA growth results have been posted to Bighorn. In Infinite Campus on a student's EL tab, make sure that you use the exit date of the last day of your 2021 school year. The NDE updated the unofficial 2021 NSPF data with WIDA growth. SPCSA uploaded new NSPF extracts that include WIDA growth to Bighorn in March. For 21-22 WIDA data, we've gone through the pre-reporting data validation, and the following steps remain per the calendar year. It's printed, and I'm referring to all of the districts receiving reports. And on the 23rd through the 31st, there's one last chance for corrections, such as making sure the correct student counts in the NSPF. And that will be relating to the post-reporting data validation for LEAs and the AMS. And June 14th, the data is posted to AMS. The final NDE results for 21-22, including WIDA growth, should be available in July. And for the WIDA screener, we'll continue to administer WIDA screeners to students whose language surveys indicate a language spoken other than English. If a student comes from out of state as EL and that state is not a WIDA state, you'll still need to administer WIDA screener first. If it is a WIDA state, you can use the student's most recent proficiency level to enter them into EL services. If there's any uncertainty about EL status, no conflicting records from the prior district, conflicting language surveys, the NDE advises screening. Make sure staff administering screener have completed screener training in WIDA training portal. If there are issues with your account or scoring, please contact the SPCSA. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn this over to Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. The first thing we're going to talk about related to participation is that NDE is going to measure that this year, and I think we've conveyed that to you previously. There's federal law that requires 95% participation school-wide and by student group. And as you hopefully are aware by now, if you don't meet these participation requirements, that can lead to consequences under the star rating system, the NSPF. You do get a warning the first year, and then if it happens again, you get a point penalty in the second year. So per the NDE, the calculations are being reset for this, so there will only be warnings this year. And as an FYI, you might already know this, but to be an ELA participant, at least for Smarter, they have to log into both parts of the test, the CAT and the PT, and then to be a math participant, same thing, both log in to both parts. They don't have to finish it, they don't have to complete it, they just have to log in. And then for ACT, they just have to respond to math one item on the test, and if they do, they're a participant for the entire test, which is math and ELA. There are student groups listed there that NDE calculates participation for, and if you want more details, it's in that manual at that link there. So this is probably the most important thing to focus on right now related to Smarter, Science, and NA, the DRC assessments. So the state testing window closed yesterday. Thank you, everybody, for getting the assessments done. I know you've all been hard at work on that. There is now a data cleanup window starting today until next Thursday, May 26th at 10 p.m. Pacific. This is an opportunity to, well, this is the last opportunity to make the following very important edits to students. And we'll go through each of these in more detail on the following slides. But again, this is the last chance. This is what NDE will use for NSPF calculations for index scores, no star ratings this year, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, but they will calculate index scores. And if you don't do these type of things, if the NDE might count students they don't supposed to count in the NSPF, they might calculate participation incorrectly, that sort of thing. So the first thing is adding reason not tested codes to students that didn't test. And if you don't do that, students can incorrectly be counted as non-participants in the participation calculations, and that can lead to a participation warning. And if you don't fix that next year, it can lead to score being reduced. So you really want to make sure all this is correct so that NDE is not accidentally counting students. The next thing is removing incorrect not tested codes from students that actually did test. We found on some spot checks that students that may be transferred to your school during the window may already have not enrolled, did not test codes added by the prior district. So maybe if you're in Clark County and the student came to you from CCSD, Clark County added those codes when they were at Clark County and said, oh, they're not enrolled here anymore. They're going. So, and then when that record got transferred to you, they still have that not enrolled code on, even though they tested at your school. So those need to be updated and removed. And then the final thing is updating demographics, especially YIS, which is year in school. And that's what NDE uses to count students in the NSPF. You want to update that to no for students that were not enrolled at your school for a certain amount of time. So that if you don't do that correctly, students might be incorrectly counted in the NSPF, and they should only count in the NSPF if they've been enrolled long enough to receive instruction representative of your school. And just a note at the bottom there, you do need to make edits separately for Smarter, Science, and NA. So if you make an edit to a student, like let's say you change YIS for a student in Smarter, but they also took Science as a 5th grader, you will have to change YIS on the Science administration as well. All right, so the first part about adding reason not tested codes to students that did not test, just going through a few steps here. This first step is to find students not in test sessions. So these are stragglers that didn't test because they weren't added to any test sessions. So you need to find those students, add them to test sessions, all test sessions as noted here. So that's the ELA CAT, PT, Math CAT, Math PT, or if you're looking at Science. So you need to add them to test sessions using the test management area of the portal. So perhaps students were just removed from test sessions because you weren't testing them. But you do need to add the codes, and to add the codes, they need to be in a test session. Except, as noted at the bottom, high school science students not supposed to take the test. For example, if you test 10th graders in science, but NDE loaded all the 9th graders for you too, you don't have to put the 9th graders in or add those not tested codes per NDE. So after you've added those straggler students to test sessions, you want to find students that have not started test statuses. So if you go here on the DRC website, you can go to that online test status dropdown, select not started, and then you can click find students. And once you do that, you can click the view edit student buttons on the right there, far right. And once you do that, you should get something like this. The student box will pop up. You need to find what test sessions the student did not test in. So as an example here, you can see the student completed the grade 6 ELA CAT, but did not take any of the other tests. So now that you have that information, you can go to the testing codes tab on that same student record, and then you should add these not tested codes for those tests that you found in the first step. So in this case, look up the student in Infinite Campus, and they were not enrolled during the testing window when you were giving the math PTs and the ELA PTs, let's say. So then you'd want to put not enrolled in those codes there. There are various not tested codes that you can use. There's absent, which hopefully is obvious. Not enrolled if they're withdrawn. You can use if you're looking at the smarter test sessions or smarter students, you can use NA if the student actually took the NAA instead. In the NA, there's a code for GEN that can be used if the student took smarter instead. You use other for opt-outs, and then there's a code that's probably pretty rare, out of state, and that's only if students are funded out of state. It's not for if students moved out of state and just couldn't test. And then here's a list of the codes and how they, what their effect is on NDE participation calculations. There's some more details in here, but generally, absent, other, and blank, like if a code is not put in but the student didn't test, those are all non-participants in the NDE participation calculations. And if you correctly code students as not enrolled or NA, then those are excluded from NDE participation calculations. So you can see why it's really important to enter these. If you just leave students as blank, they're going to be non-participants. But if the student withdrew, you should put this not enrolled code on, and then NDE throws them out of the calculation and you don't get dinged for that student. I think I saw a question on this. Is there a way to filter who has a do not test code, but they actually tested? Yes, we can. I'll talk about that on the next slide here. So the next step after you put on the reason not tested codes, you do want to check if there are any reason not tested codes from students who did test. So here you want to look up students that transferred to your school potentially during the testing window, and you want to make sure their codes are blank. So the same thing, here's an example where the student completed all portions of the test on the test sessions tab, but in the testing code section, they had not enrolled. So probably put there by the prior district. You want to remove that so the student counts toward your school participation. And then you also probably want to fix them so they don't count in your proficiency calculations, which we'll talk about on the next slide. But there's a question here from Jennifer. Is there an easy, well, I'm guessing easy way to filter students in this, because you might not know easily who transferred to your school. There is a way that I did not include in this presentation. If you go to the manage test sessions area of the DRC portal, let's go back here. So on the top where it says student management here on the top menu, if you go to test management instead, you should see the area for test sessions. And if you select your, let's say summative, your district, and you have to select school and show all your test sessions, then you can export. There's a button for export details, and that export details will give you an Excel file that allows you to see every test session for every student at your school. And if you go into that Excel file, you can select all the students who have a completed status, and then also students that did not test codes. So if there are specific questions about that, I'm happy to help separately, but there is a way to do that. It's just a little bit more involved and I didn't put it in here. And then once you find that in the Excel file, come back to DRC's student management page here, like in this section, and fix those codes. That's one easier way to do it. So I think we are, there's a question here. How should we code students who are quarantined due to COVID, attended virtually, and couldn't test during the window? If you have students like that, please contact me separately. The NDE does have a process that we'll talk about in a minute to potentially exclude those students. Generally, it's very rare, but if the student, let's say, was homebound and because due to a medical condition, because they couldn't come in due to possible COVID exposure, NDE is taking those. I don't know if they're going to approve those as exclusions from participation. So right now you should code them as probably absent or other. But if you do submit that form, potentially NDE might change that code later and it won't count against you. So we'll talk about that in a minute here. So the next step in this area is to update demographics, especially YIS. So here's just a view of the demographics tab on a student record. But if you go to the correct place, the Manage Students area, and you click on a student, you can see this demographics tab. You can download your list of students if you'd rather look at them all at once and make sure their names are correct. I'm not sure what. Generally, all of this should be correct because NDE pulled it from Infinite Campus as part of the pre-ID file way back in November, December, January. So it should be correct, but if you need to update IEP status, ELL status, etc., this is the time to do it. Here are the demographics that are available for edit, including everything from name to, like I said, ELL status, FRL, all the way to armed forces, homeless, etc. So the one we'll talk about more specifically is year in school YIS. So if the student is yes there, it counts in the NSPF school rate, proficiency rate, and it's only should be yes if the student was enrolled a sufficient amount of time, at least 120 days between the first day of school and April 15. So there's a little bit more detail on this. Especially pay attention to YIS on the demographics tab. YIS equals yes, and the student counts. Again, if they were enrolled that amount of time between those dates. That means if a student transferred to your school in the spring, but in all actuality, probably after October 1st-ish, based on a calculation I heard from at least a Clark County charter school, SPCSA school, they said their date counting back was about late September. So if a student enrolled after that, they likely did not meet the YIS criteria and should be YIS no and should not count in your NSPF. And again, this is done to exclude students that have not received sufficient instruction at your school and are therefore not representative of your school's potential proficiency rate. And this is part of federal law. It says you can only count students in the star rating system if they've been enrolled at least half the year. So NDE has said 120 days. It's a little bit more than half the year, but that's their cutoff. And they're saying we're only going to count students who have been there a majority of the time and received enough instruction at the school to be representative of the school. So you want to mark this year in school equals no for students that enrolled probably after October 1st. But there's an asterisk there. Do your own math. You can count back 120 school days from April 15. Say your calculation says that day is October 1st. Any student that enrolled after October 1st should be yes equals no. Just a few other points on these assessments. Smarter Science NA. All in progress tests. Well, we've had a few questions about this. Students didn't click submit for whatever reason. If they're in progress, those will be updated to complete and scored as usual by DRC. All secure test materials, those are things like NAA booklets and videos, those must be returned to DRC. DRC said we put this in a testing memo, or DRC sent a testing memo that we sent yesterday to our contact list. Please contact at UPS to arrange for pickup. And the deadline for UPS pickup is June 3rd. So if you don't get those booklets and videos back, probably not good. You can contact us with any questions on data cleanup, not tested codes, YIS, etc. If you have extremely technical questions, we might refer you to DRC Help Desk. Here are just some key dates that I won't read out, but for your reference, you should be getting data files from these assessments sometime in mid-July, and then student reports sometime in late July, and you'll get the printed reports in early August. And then as far as the NDE files, so NDE takes these vendor files that they get, they kind of clean them up, put them into their own format, and that's how those are the files they use for the NSPF calculations. Those should be available, including growth, which they calculate from Smarter from this year and prior year. That will be available mid to late July. ACT, we'll kind of gloss over this because there's not a whole lot new here, but results should be available soon if you haven't got them already. And then there will be a validation for ACT and DVSL in late June or early July, and we'll notify high schools when that's open. Finally, civics exams still a thing. Got to give that to students to graduate. And the end of course assessments, hopefully you figured it out by now, but they will not be administered. So here's the last call about the special requests for assessments. This is what I was talking about, students who couldn't test. Usually it's due to extreme circumstances, such as a significant medical emergency. Let's say the student is in chemotherapy and they were in the hospital and they could not participate during the entire window. Those are the kind of things NDE usually considers or will approve. So it's kind of unknown about students that are quarantined, couldn't test because they had COVID. It's unclear because usually any kind of sickness, they just say, no, that's not an extreme circumstance. But it is worth potentially submitting those. So if you have students in that situation, contact us and we can help you. We can send the form along to you and we'll submit it to NDE on your behalf. There's a question here from Jennifer on the prior slide about the civics scores. You do not need to report civics scores. I believe the student just has to take it in order to graduate. So it's kind of a local thing. It's part of your graduation requirements, making sure that students take that so they can get their diploma. All right, so moving on from assessments to accountability. Thank you for the phase 1 Nevada report card data collections. Hopefully the survey that we used this year was straightforward, easy to use, maybe less trading of files back and forth over Bighorn. We're planning on doing the same thing for phase 2 and 3, which we will release shortly to you. These all can't be completed until the school year is over, because a lot of it is like as of the end of the school year. So I know Clark County's end of school is coming up soon, so I'm assuming SPCSA schools will be done end of May. Washoe probably early June. I'm not sure about the other schools across the state. So that will be coming shortly. We will provide it to you due late June. But here are the items that we will be collecting. So it's the narratives in phase 3 that you're all familiar with, hopefully, and some other items, which we will have to collect a couple things through Bighorn because there's no way to do it through a survey. This is something where we give you a student file and you have to mark each student yes or no, that type of thing. Give you more information on that when we get it. Another upcoming collection, ADAM data collections from the NDE. This is for NSPF items like college and career readiness participation completion for high schools, chronic absenteeism for all schools, and then for middle schools, there's the 8th and 9th grade credit requirements and academic learning plans. So they're typically, NDE has these 3 files due every year. ADAM 01 will be due late July. That's the college career readiness, only high schools for that one with 12th graders. ADAM 02, chronic absenteeism. This is all schools have to submit this. The due date is TBD per NDE. You can run a report out at Infinite Campus to grab that. Same with ADAM 3. That'll be due late June. You can run the report out of IC and post it back to Bighorn. We'll give you more instructions on this as we get closer. Other accountability, there's this CTE data collection that we've mentioned previously. We've heard from some schools saying we don't have this. So if you don't have it, please let us know. And if you do, please submit by late July. We'll follow up on that as needed. As far as what we know about the NSPF, not a whole lot new from what we told you last time. There's the addendum that NDE submitted to US Ed. They took public comment. But they're basically going with what they proposed previously. The main thing is they're going to calculate scores, index scores, but not star ratings. They may generate reports, not sure yet. For growth, they're going to use 2021 and 21-22 assessment data. There are some additional notes on school designations for underperforming schools. that we've already discussed. As we've discussed previously, assessment participation will be calculated, but just warnings, chronic absenteeism, there's no bonus points this year. And that brings us to the end, and we have a few minutes for questions. But again, thank you all for joining us and for working so hard on getting assessments completed this year. It was a run. There was a lot going on, so I know you all been hard at work. So feel free to unmute yourself or put your question in chat. And if you want to drop off, that is okay as well. And Jennifer, I'll hang on the call here for a few minutes. We can talk about that if it's.
Brandon Selim from Coral Academy.
Hi, Selim.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
For the question, for the quarantine, how should we code students? Did you say we mark them other and then submit an irregularity form?
So for students that were that could not test because they were quarantined, that's your question, right? How to code them?
Yes.
So you should probably code them right now as absent or other. You do not have to submit an irregularity report. Irregularity reports are generally only for issues where the test did not go as it should. So like tech issues or student was cheating, that type of thing. So this is not an irregularity, so you don't have to do that. And if you do have students in that situation, contact me separately about that, and I can send you a form that we could try to submit to NDE. They've made no promises about any of this, and generally these approval of these exceptions from participation are very, very rare, so I wouldn't count on it, but it might be worth a shot.
Okay, so that's a different form.
But for now, I would code them absent other, and the NDE will change that later if they approve it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. There's a question here from Tara. Can show how to access the report to review they did not test codes. Yes, I can. I will. In a minute or two, I will stop sharing my screen here, and then I will try to share my screen on DRC, and we can take a look at that. And Sheila, yes, feel free to email. Okay, let me exit this screen here, and Tara, I will pull up an example. Hopefully my screen is showing, Tara.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and Connie,
I'm here. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Connie, there will be a recording available that we'll provide after this at some point. There's a question here from Emery. We had students qualify for SPED after they tested. Do we code them as SPED or not? You should only put them as SPED in the DRC system if they were SPED when they tested. So keep them no, as of the testing date generally. I know that can get rough because you test over multiple days, but so Tara, and for anyone else that's interested, if you want to pull a report of students that with the did not test codes, you go to test management, manage test sessions, and then we'll select the assessment here. And I will use Legacy as an example. And then you do have to do it by school. Unfortunately, you can't just look by district because the button doesn't light up for whatever reason, thanks to DRC. So if I do show sessions here, I'm going to try not to show any student data. System slow, sorry. And Jennifer, if you need to hop off or contact me after this, sorry, this will just take another couple minutes here. So here are the test sessions, and if you do export student details, like this.
Okay, I had followed your directions, but I didn't. I had tried to do it for the whole district, so it just
yes.
gave me a list of the sessions, and I was like, I don't want a list of the sessions, and I didn't want to have to go in, so I had.
Yeah, you have to do it by school is what I found out from DRC, which kind of makes no sense, but it's what we're working with. And if you have any questions on the Excel, let me know. On the Excel part. But you should, once you get the Excel file, there's a column that says status, and you can sort or filter on completed, in progress, not started. And then there's also a code for codes entered. And you can see it says like NER or OTH for other, NER for not enrolled, that type of thing.
Okay. Codes did not test.
Yep.
Codes. Okay, I just opened it. Let me look at it really. I
And
appreciate
Jennifer,
your time, Brandon.
yeah, no worries. Jennifer, while we're waiting on that, is it a specific question that we can talk about here with other people present, or is there?
I think so.
Okay.
We have a senior who's taken the ACT twice, this year and last year, and both times they did not score